Back in the 1960s, no matter what your natural hair looked like, if you wanted to stand out, a hairstylist could bring your fashion dreams to life. They used all kinds of creative techniques like keeping your natural bangs while adding hair pieces to give your hairstyle more volume and layers. Many celebrities at the time wore high-quality wigs so realistic that you could hardly tell they weren't real. It was considered stylish, elegant, and glamorous. At a salon in London's Mayfair district, stylists took creativity to another level, even blending wigs with hats. One design featured feathers shaped like a bird, making it look like a real bird was sitting on your head. Dyeing your hair was another popular option. There were plenty of color choices to make your hair look natural yet fashionable. Today, women have even more options. Besides traditional hair dyes, stylists can create unique patterns in your hair like ombre effects or geometric designs. They use stencils to spray temporary colors onto the hair, allowing for easy changes whenever you want. At the time, society embraced these bold fashion trends, and there was little criticism about them.
No wonder so many people in the Victorian era died young. And the children? They weren't safe either. Toys in those days were brightly colored because they were painted with heavy amounts of lead. No one realized kids might put them in their mouths. The result? Lead poisoning. Many children stayed small, looked pale, and suffered from serious mouth sores and wounds that just wouldn't heal. It wasn't bad luck. It was just a brutal time to be alive. No wonder so many people in the Victorian era died young. One big reason? Corsets. The trend for the perfect female figure started around 1797, and by 1860 it had already harmed countless women. Magazines at the time encouraged women to slim their waists, so they tightened their corsets constantly, no matter the season or occasion. You know how, in period dramas, women faint after hearing shocking news? That's not just for drama. They were literally oxygen deprived. Some women even died from broken ribs that punctured their organs, or from internal bleeding. But corsets weren't the only danger. Even stairs were deadly. During the Victorian era, the UK's population exploded and housing became crowded. People moved into narrow row houses and stairs had to be built super steep to save space. They were often uneven and narrow, some barely wide enough for a person to turn sideways. Today, the UK still reports 300,000 stair-related accidents a year. Back then, it was likely even worse. And the children? They weren't safe either. Toys in those days were brightly colored because they were painted with heavy amounts of lead. No one realized kids might put them in their mouths. The result? Lead poisoning. Many children stayed small, looked pale, and suffered from serious mouth sores and wounds that just wouldn't heal. It wasn't bad luck. It was just a brutal time to be alive. How the flush toilet killed millions of Europeans. In 1594, John Harrington invented the first flush toilet and gave it to Queen Elizabeth I. She didn't like it because the flushing sound was too loud. It made everyone in the palace know when she used the toilet, which she found embarrassing. Before this, royals and nobles used chamber pots or small enclosed toilets, just boxes with a chamber pot inside. Louis XIV used to sit on the toilet while greeting guests. The smell was so bad that his ministers didn't dare complain, even though they hated it. About 200 years later, Joseph Brahma invented a flush toilet with a rotating valve. But at that time, there were no proper sewers and toilets were connected to the Thames River, making London stink. In 1831, cholera started spreading in Europe, and people died in large numbers. The British thought it was caused by bad air. In 1848, the British passed the Public Health Act, requiring every home to have a toilet. But this made river pollution worse, and cholera kept spreading. A young man named John Snow figured out that cholera came from water polluted with waste. But no one believed him until 60 years later when the cholera bacteria was discovered, proving he was right. Women in the Victorian era deal with their periods. First of all, they didn't wear underwear. Yes, you heard that right. Underwear wasn't common in the Victorian era. Instead, women wore bloomers or long pants, which had no crotch area. This meant they didn't need to take them off when using the bathroom. Back then, there were no tampons. Women used a piece of cloth tied around their waist, using a method called the T-band. This cloth had to be washed and dried after every use, and it had to be adjusted each time for comfort. Some women even used cotton swabs as a substitute for tampons. You can imagine, not the most comfortable option. During lighter periods, many women didn't use any protection at all. That's why red skirts were so popular back then. In ancient tribes, menstruation was often considered toxic. People believed that if a man smelled menstrual blood, he would be cursed. Because of this, women on their periods were sent to special places and looked after by others. This form of isolation still exists in some cultures today. Back then, women's periods were often irregular due to poor nutrition. With a much shorter life expectancy, you were born in the Middle Ages and you happened to be a woman. Congrats. There was a 99% chance you'd be accused of being a witch, a rich single woman, basically a unicorn, and the perfect target for a witch trial. People believed women couldn't possibly make money without a man. or without the devil's help. But being poor didn't help either. If your neighbors didn't like you begging nearby, they could just accuse you of witchcraft. Had too many kids? You must have used magic to get pregnant. Can't have kids? You were obviously cursed by the devil. If you could swim, bad news. They believed only the innocent would sink. So if you floated, you must have been using dark powers. Talk to yourself? You're casting spells. Too shy to speak in public. Suspicious. They thought witches couldn't read the Bible out loud. Have a mole or a scar? They called it the devil's mark. And if you were a single woman who loved cats, game over. Back then, cats were seen as the devil's pets and tools for doing magic. So yeah, in the Middle Ages, being a woman basically meant living life on hard mode. No matter what you did, you were probably a witch. What were the beauty standards in the Middle Ages? Well, if you wanted to fit in back then, the first step was having a huge forehead. If you didn't naturally have one, no problem. Just shave off about 2 centimeters of your hairline. The bigger your forehead, the more attractive you were. Hair, the longer, the better. Some people even tried strange methods to make their hair grow longer, although those weren't exactly approved by society. They were seen as a little suspicious. As for hair color, the dream shade was a light flax blonde. To get it, women would mix goat urine with saffron, smear it all over their hair, and sit in the sun for hours until it lightened. Yeah, beauty was serious business. And for the eyes? Pluck out your eyelashes, shave off your eyebrows completely. No brows, no lashes. That was considered super beautiful. When it came to body shape, being skinny wasn't it. The fuller and rounder you were, the richer and more desirable people thought you were. Because it meant you could afford lots of food and hygiene. Let's just say it wasn't a top priority. People carried little herbal pouches, kind of like old school tea bags, and kept them under their arms or near private areas to help with. In the 18th century, the wealthy in Britain had a special love for their gardens. To show off their wealth and taste, they came up with a very strange idea, hiring living garden ornaments known as hermits. These hermits weren't gardeners or guards. Their job was to live alone in the garden, acting out the romantic ideal of a life spent in solitude and deep thought. Rich landowners would even build fake ruins and little huts, just to give their hermits a place to stay. The rules were strict. Hermits had to dress like ancient druids, avoid bathing, let their hair and nails grow long, and spend their days reading, writing, and silently pondering life, adding an air of mystery to the gardens. The role was surprisingly popular, and some hermits even signed multi-year contracts. Take Sir Charles Hamilton, for example. He hired a hermit to live in his garden at Paynes Hill Park for 7 years, offering a salary equal to about $125,000 today. But the hermit got fired just 3 weeks later after being caught drinking at a local pub. As times changed, this strange trend of garden hermits slowly faded away by the end of the 18th century. What's it like to be a single woman in the Middle Ages? Back then, having a daughter wasn't considered a good thing because it was expensive. If a woman gave birth to a girl, the father's first thought was usually, how do we get her married off as soon as possible? For girls, the biggest worry was marriage. To get a good husband, you had to be pretty, polite, and above all, obedient. You were expected to be kind, forgiving, and even turn a blind eye if you were treated unfairly. And of course, every family needed to prepare a dowry, money or valuables the bride's family had to pay the groom when she got married. This dowry was seen as compensation for the man, just for marrying her. But not all families could afford it. So many girls had to start working at noble households from a young age, just to save up for their future dowry. If she wasn't married by 25, she was already considered too old. And if a woman couldn't find a husband, her parents would often send her to a convent to become a nun. In those days, having an unmarried daughter at home was seen as a burden, not something to be proud of. So the freedom we have today is built upon the struggles of those who came before. Never take it for granted. Some of the grossest customs from the Middle Ages. Queen Isabella of Castile was proud of being a warrior queen, and just as proud of following certain traditions. She once bragged that she only bathed twice in her whole life, once when she was born and once before her wedding. Weddings were usually held in June because May was when people bathed the most. That's actually how the tradition of carrying a bouquet started, to cover up the bride's body odor. Women also used fans to hide their rotten teeth and help with bad breath. Long, greasy hair? That was considered beautiful. Hats and headpieces weren't just fashion. They helped hide lice and kept bugs from falling into food. Believe it or not, bad teeth were a sign of wealth. If your teeth were yellow and decayed, it meant you could afford luxury items like sugar. People also believed that women who bathed too much would become infertile. So, yeah, they just had to live with the smell. These medieval customs might sound gross or even funny to us today, but for people back then, it was just everyday life. History can be strange, but that's what makes it fascinating. Why did so many nuns get pregnant in the Middle Ages? What were they really doing inside the convents every day? These convents were usually locked behind iron gates. Even when priests visited, they could only speak to the nuns through small windows. Most of the time, nuns had to stay silent, spending their days reading, meditating, and eating without making a sound. If they wanted to talk to each other, they had to use hand gestures, but that was just the surface. Many young girls were sent to convents not because of faith, but simply to have food to eat. They were from poor families, and the convent promised basic survival. Some of these nuns started inviting travelers and pilgrims to stay overnight, and would charge for their services. By the 15th century, this became common. Many men would leave the convents only to realize their valuables had gone missing. The convents relied on public donations, but those were never enough to survive. So these side hustles became a way to keep things running. Eventually, crying babies could be heard more often than prayers. To protect the reputation of the convent, some nuns even threw newborns into rivers. What did people use before toilet paper? In ancient Rome, people used a tool called a tersorium, basically a stick with a sponge tied to the end. They'd soak it in vinegar or salt water to clean it. Back then, public toilets didn't have stalls. Everyone sat side by side and there was a water channel in front of them. The sponge sticks were shared. You'd rinse it, use it, and pass it on. Another option used in ancient Rome and Greece was the pissoi, smooth, round, or oval stones. They were polished to avoid scratching the skin. There's even an ancient Greek cup at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts that shows a man using one of these stones in the bathroom. Some Greeks also used pieces of broken pottery which were originally used for voting people into exile. But pottery shards were sharp, so not exactly safe for personal hygiene. In ancient China, people used flat sticks made of wood or bamboo. They were cheap and could be washed and reused. Even though paper was invented in China as early as the 7th century, it was mainly used for writing. Using it to wipe? That would have been seen as wasteful, maybe even disrespectful. One of the biggest mysteries of the Middle Ages, still unsolved today. In 1284, the town of Hamelin was overrun by a rat infestation. A mysterious man who claimed to be a rat catcher appeared and offered to get rid of the rats. The townspeople agreed to pay him a coin for every rat he eliminated, and he accepted the deal. Using his magical pipe, the man played a tune that mesmerized the rats, leading them to the Weser River where they drowned. But when the job was done, the townspeople went back on their word and refused to pay him. Angry and betrayed, the rat catcher left the town. A few days later, he returned, and this time, the townspeople were too busy with their daily lives to notice him. He played his pipe again, but this time, it didn't attract rats. Instead, the music enchanted 130 of the town's children. The children followed him out of the town and disappeared without a trace. To this day, the fate of the children remains a mystery. Since that day, the 130 children were never seen again. No one knows where they went. No one ever found a single trace. All that's left is a haunting legend that still echoes through the town of Hamelin. Practical. Were women's accessories 100 years ago? Today, we often see ring bracelet combos that can switch between two accessories. But did you know similar designs already existed decades ago? Back then, it looked like an ordinary ring, but once unfolded, it turned into a stylish bracelet. The clasp at the end could even secure it in place. Pretty clever, right? In the 1950s, women who needed to touch up their makeup on the go had the perfect solution, a purse that turned into a mini vanity. When opened, it revealed a small mirror and space for makeup essentials, allowing women to freshen up anytime, anywhere. About 70 years ago, swim caps were not just about keeping your hair dry, they were also designed to look fashionable. These caps came in various colors and styles, and some even helped frame the face beautifully, making it perfect for cute beach photos. And going even further back to the 1800s, upper-class women often carried a walking cane, also known as a lady's cane. But here's the twist, many of these canes had hidden compartments for storage, and some could even turn into self-defense weapons. Women could choose a design that suited their taste and needs.
100 years of black men's hairstyles. How they changed over time. Back in the 1910s, black men were required to keep their hair short and always wear a hat in public. It wasn't a fashion choice. It was a social rule. 1920s issue. The excitement continues. 100 years of black men's hairstyles. How they changed over time.
Ever had a full makeover by a professional? Back in 1963, a beauty salon in Mayfair, London, was already offering full head-to-toe transformations. The popular egg hair wash trend, it actually started way back then. They would beat an egg, slowly apply it to damp hair, lather it up, and leave it on for 30 minutes to make the hair smoother and shinier. While waiting, why not do some skincare? A rich face cream was applied with an upward massage technique to help reduce fine lines on the neck. For the eyes, anti-wrinkle eye masks were used, And yes, this little brush might look a bit funny, but it helped spread the face mask evenly for better absorption. Worried about large pores? Even back then they had specialized machines that sprayed a fine mist of pore tightening lotion. The makeover wasn't just about skincare, it included a full manicure and makeup application too. Stylists would create a look that matched each person's unique face shape and features, and even outfits were pre-selected for the complete transformation. Now take a look at this girl. Anyone can look like a beauty.
Most disgusting medieval customs Queen Isabella of Castile, as queen, often boasted about sticking to certain traditions, proudly claiming she only bathed twice in her life, once when she was born and once before her wedding. Similarly, King Louis XIII of France took his first bath at the age of 7. In the Middle Ages, people believed that excessive washing, especially in private areas, could lead to infertility. Despite this, it became difficult to bear the stench of those around them. As a result, medieval women often carried bouquets of flowers with them, a practice that even continued during weddings. They also liked to cover their faces with fans because they didn't brush their teeth, leading to blackened teeth, a condition known as Noble's disease. This was due to sugary foods which caused cavities and were a luxury only the wealthy could afford. The same neglect extended to their hair. Since they rarely washed their hair, women with thinning hair often wore wigs. Cleaning these wigs was inconvenient, so they didn't bother, but instead they powdered them to mask the smell, which led to lice infestations. To keep lice out of their food, they wore hats.
This is the bouncing bicycle, produced between 1934 and 1937. It has small front wheels and large back wheels. Just give it a little bounce and it moves forward like a spring. As for speed, it all depends on your stamina, but the inventor claims it can reach up to 24 kilometers per hour. Plus, it has plenty of space on the pedals, so you can happily ride with a friend to work and back. No need to worry about not having time for exercise. You're staying active and having fun. This is a 1937 British taxi, and you won't believe it, but it actually offers washing services. It saves valuable time for every worker, helping you feel refreshed and ready for the day. By 1957, these double-decker buses had to be able to tilt up to 28 degrees without tipping over before they could carry passengers. But test drivers often pushed it to the extreme, trying it at a crazy 30-degree angle. And as for today's buses, they're definitely much safer and more reliable than those from back in the day. Back in the 1860s, women who experienced anxiety, mood swings, or depression were often taken to the doctor by their husbands. At the time, these symptoms were diagnosed as a medical condition called hysteria, but today, we know it was really just anxiety. Doctors treated hysteria with pelvic massages, helping women reach what was called hysterical paroxysm, which, in modern terms, simply means an orgasm. So many women kept coming back for treatment that doctors became exhausted by the end of the day. To make the process faster and easier, a vibrating device was invented, allowing treatment without the doctor having to do it manually. And that's how the vibrator was born. Back then, it was seen as a medical breakthrough, and only the wealthy could afford one. But over time, it became associated with the adult industry, completely changing its public perception. Eventually, it was labeled as a sinful product, far removed from its original medical purpose. What do you think about this? Let me know in the comments.
Why did noble women smell so bad in the Middle Ages? It all started with Queen Marie Antoinette. She loved wearing tall, extravagant hairstyles. Noble women became obsessed with copying her style. But these wigs weren't just expensive. Once you put one on, you had to keep it on for months. Even at night, they couldn't take them off. They had to sleep sitting up against a pile of pillows. If their wigs lost shape or got messy, they used pig fat to harden them. But the problem? Pig fat starts to stink. Now mix that with unwashed hair and the smell of syphilis infections on their scalps, and you get an unbearable stench. To cover it up, they drench their wigs in scented powder, usually jasmine or orange blossom, sometimes using up to 2 pounds at a time. But that wasn't even the craziest part. These wigs were stuffed with bread, cotton, and other fillers, making them weigh up to 22 pounds and reach up to 4 feet tall. And the worst part? At candlelit parties, their wigs sometimes caught fire from chandeliers hanging too low.